Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. I think those of you who are here have braved what looked like a nasty night of weather, and I hear the traffic is terrible and the UN is in town and all those good things. So somehow I've managed to pick the perfect night for what I know will be a really fascinating conversation. It has been one of my highest things on my to-do list since I became the dean, to find a way to lure Ken Lerer to our school. And the fact that I have now succeeded, I could probably just call it a day at this point, but we're going to have a great talk, and Ken Auletta is largely responsible for helping me lure him. Neither of these gentlemen needs any introduction, and so I'm going to get out of the way, but other than to say we love having you all here at the CUNY Graduate School of Journalism. I'm Sarah Bartlett, the dean. I should have said that before. And I see many faces who I know, so without any further ado, let's get started.
Thanks, Sarah. I should make a disclosure. Kenny and I met each other in 1974. He was in another line of work then. He was deputy campaign manager for Ramsey Clark, who was running for the U.S. Senate. I was in another line of work. I was the campaign manager for Howard Samuels, who was running for governor, both Democrats. And I'm happy, sad for them, but happy to say that with our help, both lost. So, and Kenny and I have been friends since. Let me begin, Kenny, with the first question, which is, you're doing something very unusual, which is investing in news, online news operations. Where do you see as the revenues that coming in that many people are very skeptical will come in?
Do I have to care about that?
Well, you are a VC.
The same place, the same revenue that comes to non-digital. It's advertising, one, and then I think quite soon it'll be licensing your IP. So there are two revenue streams, and subscription is three. So three revenue streams, and I would bet, although I don't know this for a fact, but I certainly know it in the digital world, that traffic leads advertising by years, sometimes decades. And then advertisers finally figure it out, and it's not surprising that they want to advertise where their eyeballs. So I'm not even a little bit concerned about revenue supporting digital content companies, digital news companies. You just can't be too early, because then you have to wait too long and you run out of money. You can't be too late, because then you've missed your opportunity. So if you time it right, advertising will happen. So I think you're already seeing the pendulum swing from broadcast to digital. It'll keep swinging more to the right and faster, and I don't give it any concern at all.
Do you see things like events or merchandise, as the New York Times does cruises? Do you see that as a big revenue option?
No. I bought a Mickey Mantle ball from the New York Times store a couple of years ago.
You could have bought a Donald Trump hat.
I didn't do that. No, there's arguably a place. We experimented with it at the Huffington Post for commerce, contextual commerce, clearly defined that it's commerce.
What does contextual commerce mean?
Oh, it means that it has to fit into the content. It just can't be like a Mickey Mantle ball in the New York Times. That's non-contextual content. I did. So, yeah, there's a place, but I think it's so that's the fourth revenue stream.
You mentioned subscriptions, and one of the things that Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump agree on is that the middle class is frozen largely, despite the report that appeared in the Times front page today, with their income, and people are choking with subscriptions, monthly payments. Do you see that as a real growth area?
Have
Of
to
course,
be-
I'm about to
I have
ask you about the investment you just made.
I was going
Mr.
to say, I have to
Fisher.
be careful what I've said in the past.
I know that.
I see it for some digital publications and not for others.
The
So
difference being what?
the kind of content and who you're appealing to, what consumer you're appealing to. So you're talking about Jim Vanderhooy and Roy and Mike Allen, who are three guys who have left Politico and are starting a new digital content company, not named, not defined publicly, but they've raised a whole bunch of money because of their track record, and they're really smart guys. And part of their business model is subscriptions, as it was when they were at Politico. And that appeals to a certain segment, and they'll be very successful, I think, with that model. But you know, for other broader content companies, I mean, give it a try. I've never tried it seriously.
If you were the CEO of the New York Times, what would you do to generate more revenue?
Well, I like Arthur. I'm glad I'm not the CEO of the New York Times.
I assume you're also glad he's not here, so you can give me an honest answer.
But Alex will tell him everything I say. So here's what you have to do if you're the CEO of the New York Times or another traditional media company, whether it be video or non-video. Somebody said this to me. You have to learn to fix the plane while you're flying it. It's easier, I'm not a pilot, that you land the plane and then you fix it and then it takes off again. He doesn't have that freedom. So he has to fix it while he's flying it. He has to watch the legacy business. He has to maintain the legacy business. He has to try to hold on to his advertisers. He has to try to hold on to his readers. While here, you need to invest in basically a brand new business. So that's a question of timing. How long can they hang on for the digital business to grow and flourish in traffic and in revenue before their traditional business hits the ground?
So would you jettison the print edition?
Ultimately, but not yet. I'm not familiar enough with the finances of the New York Times, but I have a grandson who's 2. He won't be reading the New York Times in print, I can guarantee. And how old's your grandson?
3.
Oh, he won't either.
But what do you know, one of the figures that that just punched me in the nose when I encountered it a couple of years ago, the New York Times had, this is 2 years ago, the average reader of the New York Times print newspaper spent 44 minutes a day reading the New York Times. The average reader of the New York Times online spent 45 minutes a month. So that was the reason why advertisers paid 10% for the same 100% ad they got in the print edition.
Mm-hmm.
How do you change that? How do you get people to spend more time looking at your ads?
Well, so ads also are changing a lot, right? I mean, they're display ads are not in vogue anymore. Native ads are, like at BuzzFeed, what we did at BuzzFeed, what Jonah did at BuzzFeed. So ads are changing a lot too, and they're becoming part of the product. But you clearly have to say that they're ads. That'll help. I just think it's timing. I mean, like I said, traffic is well in, the ad agencies are like the United States Congress. It takes forever for them to get on with it. And it's going to take another bunch of years for the shift to be made. And a lot of these, I also think there's going to be a lot of consolidation over the next couple of years. So a lot of companies, digital companies, small ones, are not going to make it. And there'll be a lot of consolidation, and there'll be a bunch of big ones, and then they'll have more might in the marketplace to do what they want to do.
But tell me whether I'm reading you correctly. You're assuming that the reader the user of the newspapers will change the amount of time they spend for using ads,
Well, there won't.
either through native or some other.
Well, so, look, when we launched the Huffington Post, Benjamin and Isabel, my children who are now grown up, grew up on MTV and Nickelodeon. And they didn't come in one day and say, Daddy, I can't watch this. It's not a 27-minute segment, and where are the commercials, and what's going on? They didn't know from broadcast TV. They just accepted what cable was. So today, the 10-year-old or the 12-year-old they're never going to pick up a newspaper when they're grown-ups. There's not going to be a choice for advertisers. There's not going to be a choice for consumers. Sure, there'll be some publications that survive. There'll be magazines that survive. But by and large, you can see it now with TV. You can see it with the Olympics. You can see it with a lot of examples. I was at a board meeting today, and they were giving an example that I guess I'm not allowed to talk about. But, you know, the younger generation is all streaming. And guess what? You can't monetize that now. But guess what? You will be able to in the future.
So be patient.
Be patient and raise a whole bunch of money and don't run out.
Talk about another person who one hopes is patient. Everyone would agree, I'm sure everyone in this room would agree, that the Washington Post is a better newspaper under its new proprietor. Jeff Bezos has put some money into the newspaper. Do you see that paper making money sometime soon?
I know nothing about the Washington Post other than to know that the Grahams ultimately didn't know what to do with it, and they were forced to sell it. That it lost favor with the people who I know who read the Washington Post, and it's made a real comeback now, at least with the people who I hang out with. I have no idea what their readership is. I have no idea what their advertising is. I don't follow it. But
well, their page views, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it exceeded the New York Times today, right?
It did, and then it dropped back, but they're almost in.
yeah, so I would imagine that the Washington Post has the same future as the New York Times. No newspaper and no ink at some point in the future, soon enough that I'll see it go away.
3 years ago, you launched NowThis Media. Short video, very short video clips. What's the business plan?
Well, NowThis is so a little history on NowThis. We launched it too early, and I hired who I thought were really great people. It didn't work out because it was too early and they were traditional media executives. And it didn't catch on. And then I made a change and I messed it up again. But third time, I got it right, mostly because, well, for two reasons. One, that the world caught up to what we were trying to do. We were too far ahead of what's happening now in video. And two, I finally said to a young woman who was there who was 27, I wanted you to be editor for so long. Will you just please take the job? And so she did. And now the newsroom is filled with people who were producing the news for themselves rather than people who were producing the news for a different demo.
Is that what you mean by traditional?
Yeah, and it's made all the difference in the world. So I forget who I was talking to today, but I was making the point that that to be a good digital video editor, Alex will agree with this, because Alex video reports to Alex at the New York Times, that you have to have people producing it and editing it for themselves, or it just doesn't work. Like, how would you know what to produce for Snapchat? You would be pathetic at that.
Many other things, too.
But especially that.
Right.
And I would, too, but we have a Snapchat Discover channel that's doing incredibly well, and it's being produced by 10 young people, all under the age of 30, who were producing it for themselves.
But do you assume that a young person, let's say, who just got out of Harvard, might be different than a young person who just graduated State University in Iowa, in terms of what their tastes and sensibilities were?
Sure, but I don't know where you're going with that.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. So
but
a couple of weeks
but
ago.
the argument is, the question I'm really getting at is elitism. Is there something where some of the people who might be recruited to create this new site have a sensibility that is elite and therefore doesn't reach?
Well, then don't hire them. About a month and a half ago, I was in the room with the political editors for NowThis News trying to talk about how we were going to cover the election. And at the end, I didn't know everybody. There were like a dozen people in the room. They introduced themselves, and I said, what do you do? And one person said, I said, what did you do before? And he said, I worked at a salsa bar. I didn't know what a salsa bar was, but and then I said, what did you do? And the other there were 3 people who had never been in the media business before, who I don't even know how we hired them, and they're doing a spectacular job.
So describe.
Yeah, so hire only people who work in salsa bars if you work in the media business. That's one takeaway.
Now you know what a salsa bar is now, right?
I still don't know.
So tell the audience what this news is. What is the idea behind it?
So the idea is pretty simple and obvious, which was the video world is being disrupted like the non-video world was disrupted 10 years ago. We were lucky enough to hit the timing right with the Huffington Post because it was just at the beginning. You know, I love baseball, so maybe it was still in the dugout. We didn't get to home plate yet, but that's where you want to be. So it was pretty clear that the print world was going to be disrupted by the digital world, so which was the business idea behind the Huffington Post. Fast forward 12 years, and the exact same thing that's happening in the print world that happened 10 years ago, 11 years ago, it's happening in the video world now. So the video world is being totally disrupted. ABC, NBC, CBS, cable television, you name it, just like print was 12 years ago. And the idea behind NowThis News was we thought it was going to happen. We thought we knew what short-form digital video was going to look like. We understood that Facebook was going to go all in on video at some point. We thought Snapchat was more than real. And we thought it was going to be a great big market, and we wanted to be a first mover in that market. And today, it's a big company. It's only second to BuzzFeed. It's the top producer of election video in the country. I think this month we'll do 2.6 or 7 billion video views. Advertisers are lined up at the door to come in. It's a real company.
What's the average length of a piece?
Well, longer than I want it to be.
If he didn't have a tan, he'd be blushing now.
No, longer than I want it to be. I'm going to embarrass myself. Yeah.
How long?
I wanted all the pieces. Initially, when we launched, I said 15 seconds. And they all laughed at me, and I went out of the room, and they made 4-minute videos. And I said, 4-minute videos? What are you doing? So anyway, over the last 2.5 years, we've compromised, and it's about 45 seconds. Some get to like 1.5 minutes, and I like have a fit. But it's about 45 seconds.
And Andrew, the average piece is what, 1:40? 1:40 on network?
So, not so bad.
For a while there, you were doing Vine and Instagram. Oh, I think there's actually expansion again.
No, not only.
Really?
No, we were, so NowThis News, let's see, Facebook, Snapchat, Vine is no more. It's gone. It's yeah. Well, we were doing all the social feeds. We were trying everything. We were throwing spaghetti against the wall to see what stuck. A lot of Instagram, and as the social feeds have some have gone up, some have gone down, we've moved to follow the social feeds. But we also have a pretty healthy, I think it's called O&O traffic now on our website, and I think they sell it to third parties now.
I presume the success is predicated on the mobile phone,
No,
right?
it's
Total.
100%.
And your presumption of failure on the part of the broadcast networks is they're not on mobile? And you have to wait till 6:30 for it to come on, or what?
Well, the presumption is, just like print, that the people who produce terrific news for TV, that group of people can't produce it on mobile because it's a different mindset, it's a different demo, it's a different expertise. It's a mistake I made at NowThis News by hiring traditional broadcasters as talented as they were. You can't do it. You just can't do it. Period, the end. And until, who am I going to pick on? Until CBS News sets up a shop with everyone from CUNY who just graduated and mans their news department, it's never going to work.
But when you talk about length of a piece being at least, if not more than half what a piece is on network news, and obviously the being a little upset at the 4-minute piece, which might allow more depth of reporting.
No one will watch a 4-minute piece.
So you're assuming that the audience is, tomorrow or today's audience of young people, just is very different than?
No, no, I don't think they're different at all. I'm presuming that the device that they're watching on is made for short-form video. I don't think they're different at all. I think they're the exact same people, but the technology and the distribution demands different kinds of content. That's all I'm saying. That's an important point.
But if you wanted a Walter Cronkite doing a half-hour on the newscast on the Vietnam War, and Lyndon Johnson convinced after you watch it that our support for the war is over, or you see Ted Koppel doing an in-depth report on Nightline, is there going to be a variation of that?
No, there'll actually be that, just maybe not when I'm around. So, I think here's how video is going to work. You start with short form, then you can build into serial, and then serial can build into long form. And I think that's pretty obvious that that's what's going to happen. I can't give you the timing of long form on digital, but I can say with great certainty that today's consumer, that the longer, that as the mobile phone gets adopted by more and more people, and that becomes like 1 through 10 in importance, that everything will be on your mobile phone. And people will figure out and be happy, just like some people read books now on their mobile phone. Will sit down and watch Walter Cronkite for a half hour on their mobile phone, for sure. Just not there yet, but it will be.
Let's go back to Huffington Post.
See, I don't think, for 1 second,
Let's not go back
you're
to the
being
Huffington
polite
Post.
to me. I don't think that what's happening is pulling journalism down. I don't think it's vapid. I don't think it's less serious. I don't think it's less substantive. I think it's just a different form. And I think you can tell a story in a half hour. I think you can tell a different story, but still important in 5 minutes. I think you can tell the same story, but very differently in 45 seconds. And so if we had launched NowThis News and it had been a half hour segments, I would have lost all my money in like a month. Just, it's not there yet.
When you started the Huffington Post, staying on this point, you were criticized, you and Ariana were criticized for not paying journalists and for aggregating or stealing, if you would. You
thought
changed.
you were going to be nice to me.
Well, no, but you just warned me. You threw a shot across my bow. I'm going to shoot back, pal. So you changed. Why? You got religion.
Well, I'm not going to accept your premise, but we'll just move on beyond
Which
that
one?
premise.
Not paying journalists or aggregation?
I think you used the word stealing.
Well, that was the aggregation part.
Yes. So
Right.
I'm not going to accept that premise. We started out having a snippet of a piece and then going to the original source. That's fair use. That's not stealing. That's allowed. In the news section and in the blog section, we started out with people who wanted to write, and we didn't pay them. That was a business model. If people want to write and not get paid, it's okay with me.
No, but then you began to pay, and you began to
No,
hire
we never.
journalists.
Okay, so blogs, news.
Right.
Blogs always stayed the same.
Right.
Never paid.
Right.
Write what you want to write. But then we hired an editorial staff, and the editorial staff started writing their own pieces from scratch off news and entertainment and culture and whatnot, and they were paid, just like a newspaper.
One of the things that I've always been curious about is that here you are, you and Ariana sell the Huffington Post for $300 some odd million to AOL. And yet, within months almost, you and Jonah Peretti, who was largely responsible for...
It was before we sold it, but go ahead. I'll correct your story.
Why didn't they insist on you signing a non-compete so you couldn't start BuzzFeed?
No, so the timing is off. So we started the Huffington Post, and Jonah was our partner in the Huffington Post. He oversaw building the technology. And there came a time, and it was one of the reasons for success is that Jonah learned how to take advantage of SEO and have...
At the Huffington Post.
At the Huffington Post. That was the success of the Huffington Post. We took advantage of SEO. And Jonah was the best at that. Jonah got bored at some point and said, you know what, I want to try a whole lot of different things to figure out how we can make this traffic move. And he wanted it, and it was like a skunkworks project. And we didn't want him to leave the Huffington Post because he was so talented. So I said, well, do this, but I'll invest and stay here, and you can do both. And anything you create at BuzzFeed in skunkworks we'll use at the Huffington Post. And he said, great. And then BuzzFeed, over more years than you're remembering, was just bumping along until then we really leaned into editorial with Ben Smith. And then that's when it really took off. And that was after the sale of the Huffington Post, well after the sale of the Huffington Post.
I understand, but why,
why didn't Tim, I asked him. I was a good negotiator.
So BuzzFeed, there were these reports that it missed its revenue targets.
Yeah.
And Jonah denied that was true.
I actually denied it.
They didn't miss their...
No, that was a incorrect story by the FT that no, we did not miss our revenue targets. That was a wrong story.
So as the chairman of the board of BuzzFeed, you're saying that...
I said that to Recode to the day after the FT came out. And that was a long time ago. BuzzFeed now, just for the record, is booming as it was then.
He was a PR executive at one point in his career, I might add. Talk about Facebook. Enormous power. You talked about anticipating that they were going all in on mobile, and obviously the world would follow them. Do you worry about their power?
Mm-hmm.
Tell us why.
I worry about it, but there's nothing you can do about it. Well, so my first real job after losing a bunch of political campaigns was working at Warner Amex Cable. And that was in the 1980s. And the country, a bunch of cable companies were laying pipe across the country to wire the country for cable. And there were about 6 or 7 companies. And at the end of the wiring, they controlled the distribution for cable TV in the whole country. Cablevision, Comcast, Time Warner, maybe Charter. I'm blanking on the other ones, right? But they own the distribution, which was huge. Today, you could argue that Facebook is as powerful as all those cable companies rolled up into one, because they own the digital distribution. So when I think about the 1980s and how 6 or 7 companies own cable distribution, and now you think about the digital world, it's not a stretch, it's a little bit of a stretch to say that Facebook is as powerful as all those cable companies.
But then you have a company that you're involved with and support, Snapchat. Do you see them as a potential rival to Facebook?
Oh, well, Snapchat's going to be, I believe, a great big company living side by side Facebook. So Facebook and Snapchat, you know, and Google and Amazon. I mean, I'm exaggerating to make a point of how powerful Facebook is.
But when you said you don't know how to combat it, that's how you combat it, isn't it? By having competition like that.
Did I say I didn't know how to combat it?
Yeah, you said, I'm not sure what you can do about it.
Oh, well, that doesn't mean to combat it. You just have to live with it. Right now, Facebook has a bear hug in the industry. And if you want to start a content company, you better go along, because that's where consumers are right now. It'll always be a massive company, but there'll be another half a dozen companies that'll have their big share. But you can't launch a content company now without launching it on top of Facebook. It's just not possible.
But what is it that Facebook imposes upon you as an online news organization that you chafe at?
No, I don't.
Nothing?
Nothing.
Just they have power, that's it.
I mean, I don't even chafe at that. It's the fact. They're big, and you need them to spread your content, period, the end. I'm not criticizing Facebook. I'm suggesting that right now they have immense power in the marketplace, and there's no reason to fight it because it's there. You might as well just go with it.
You joined recently the Viacom board. Do you see a potential connection with BuzzFeed and Viacom?
No. There are all these rules when you're a director of a public company.
What you can talk about? There's just a bunch of journalists in the room.
No one cares. I went to my first Viacom board meeting today.
And he was the only one without a tie, you told me.
No, I was so embarrassed. That was a silly story. That was a story in the New York Post that it was just made up.
So here's a company, Viacom, just among friends here, who is in a tough period right now. How do you turn it around?
I'm on a board of this company, Ken. I can't answer that question. Substitute Viacom for another name. It's like Arthur's problem at the New York Times. You have to learn to fix these companies. So let me talk generically. Is that fair? Sure. I'm not talking about Viacom now. So the cable industry, all analog video, cord cutting, consumers went streaming, going to mobile, not watching the TV, the glass TV in the living room as much. How many more years anyone here can fill in X? How many more years until the chart that goes like this goes like that? If they didn't have cable subs now, it'd be over. Cable subs are what's propping them up. And it will prop them up for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. I don't know how long. I'm not an expert in that. I'm not an expert in anything, but I won't make that up. So that's a problem. Just like readers of the Times eventually are going to all want to read it online. People who watch, name a cable, Housewives of New York, at some point will want to watch it will want to stream it, will want to watch it on their phone, will not want to sit in their living room and watch it. Same exact thing. So if you're a if you run a network now, a cable network, you better prepare for what's going to happen in the world in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, or else at the end of the day, you're done.
And one of the things to prepare, going back to what you said earlier, is to hire the right kind of people who get the digital world.
Yeah, so NBC did something interesting. There's a show called The Voice, which is singers.
Big hit show.
Yeah, and it's an hour show. And they made a 5-minute segment of The Voice from scratch, and they put it on Snapchat. So that's a little baby example of it's not even putting your toe in the water. It's like, you know, putting 1/1,000,000th of your toe in the water. But that's kind of where the world is going. And NBC and all the cable networks are going to have to learn to do what the New York Times is trying to do. Same thing, but with video, not print.
You've had Jonah Peretti moving to LA. You had Shane Smith of Vice moving to LA. You've got video, much of it driven by Northern California companies.
No.
No, Facebook, I mean.
Oh, yeah. You mean the distribution? Yeah.
And do you have a sense that, in fact, the New York as the media capital is shifting west?
No. I have a feeling that, so LA, when we started our fund 4 years ago, we saw no companies in LA. Now we probably see 6 a month. Not that we've invested in, but just.
Got it.
And so LA is becoming a more interesting place to look for companies to invest. I think it's because so much of the video world is out there and so many creatives are out there that's a place where the entertainment side of video will prosper. But I don't see LA ever coming close to the New York investing world in the internet.
I have one more question, then we're going to go out to the audience for questions. And you were an AOL executive at a time when the worst merger in corporate history was
Thank you.
made. I just thought I'd remind you of that. When you look back on that experience, why didn't it work? And what did we learn from that that's valuable?
Well, first of all, I was against that merger, as you know, because we're friends. But that's neither here nor there. And I was against it for the reason it failed is because the cultures of the company were so black and white that it was impossible to see how those companies, from a cultural point of view, would get along. And I believe that that's what killed the merger. From a business combination, it made a lot of sense, and a lot of the business rationale has been proven out. A lot of it. But the night before the merger was going to be announced, literally, I'm going to embellish it a little bit, at 11:59, the executives were still negotiating what Jerry Levin's title would be and what Steve Case's title would be. And I was on the phone thinking, I want to go home. It's like, what the hell is going on? It was a miserable culture fit. Miserable. The Time people hated the AOL people. The cable people didn't want to have anything to do with AOL. It was, from day one, it was a disaster from a culture fit,
So
and that's why it failed.
So if someone in this audience is starting a company and is about to be, and is proposed to be acquired by a larger company. The question, how do they gauge the culture?
Well, these were two large companies that
Right.
that I believe was announced as a merger of equals, which is a real way to say we are going to really fight it out, right?
It was a lie. AOL was
beware
buying
of merger
them,
of
right,
equals.
right, right.
There's no such thing as a merger of equals. So most big companies in the media world, when they buy a smaller media company, wreck it. I think it's a very bad track record. They crush it. The best way, if you're going to sell your company to a big company, is to say, I want to be over here, and I know you own me, but leave me alone. And let me grow my business, because that's why you bought me in the first place. And at some point, if it works and I get really big, then I can kind of come inside. But if I come inside now, and your executives who kind of don't have a clue, because you're in a different business, try to tell us what to do, it's not going to work. And that happens way too much, way too much. And then the CEO leaves, and So I think the right way is to leave the smaller company alone. Obviously, coordinate, but don't suffocate them. And those are the, so Iger did that with Pixar. He did a great job, right?
Right.
So you could do it with big companies, you could do it with small companies, but if the culture is different, don't stuff it in. It won't work.
Questions?
Yep, let me give one.
Would you share your name, too?
Sure. My name is Barbara Rabb, and I currently work at the Ford Foundation funding journalism and media, but I come out of many, many years at NBC News and other TV newsrooms. So I'm fascinated with this kind of fixation on the New York Times and the Washington Post, and can they survive, and what do they have to do, and are they going to be able to keep the plane up and fly it and fix it? Because I guess my question is that really the right question? Is that really the right end game? Maybe the New York Times and the Washington Post should not live on, except that many of us in this room grew up with them, and it would be like crazy if they didn't exist for us, right? But when we ask that question, I think underneath the question is, will two paragons of historically great journalism be able to survive the disruption? And I would just say, and I'd be curious to know whether you agree or disagree with this, and then I actually have a part 2 to it, but if what we're really saying is, will great journalism survive, I would argue that the answer is absolutely. We're seeing a lot of great journalism in a lot of new places. And so I just am kind of curious about why we focus on how are we going to keep the legacy places going. Maybe that's not the right question. And the part B to this question is, when I read about the Times' decision to stop Metro, it's not going to do Metro anymore, and it's phasing out a bunch of other stuff, and it's beefing up California. I think Andrew will agree with this. Andrew Hayward will agree with this. Those of us in TV news always had to listen to the criticism that you're just ratings obsessed, you're not really doing journalism, you're kind of pandering to your audience, et cetera. And so I'm wondering whether one of the ways that the New York Times is fixing the plane while flying it is starting to go down that slope that broadcast news has always sort of been, considered sort of the cheap cousin because it cared about ratings. But I think the phase out of Metro and the beefing up of California is the same thing. I think they're looking at the same kinds of things for the first time and saying, we're going to play to the numbers.
Kenny, you want to respond?
Oh, you're obsessing about the New York Times, and you just blame me for obsessing about it. Look, I think that the New York Times is the best place for journalism in the world, and to this day, and throughout my whole life. And I'm not obsessing about the future of journalism. I agree with you about the future of journalism, but I would hope that they have a place forever because they're so good at what they do. If it doesn't come to pass, it doesn't. But I talk about them because I hold them at the highest standard. So that's why I talk about it. I'd like Calvin to read it on his mobile phone. That's my grandson.
We have one. Okay.
Well, you asked the question. Maybe you should answer that question.
No, I'm guilty of obsessing about the New York Times.
Okay.
Ken, could you talk about the future of BuzzFeed? I think in a kind of a basic way, I mean, I'm not sure everybody in this room knows, you know, sort of the ins and outs of the split that I've read
And
about.
since you can't see her, this is Margaret Sullivan talking.
So, I write about media for the Washington Post, but I wondered if you could talk in kind of a basic way about what's happening at BuzzFeed with the, as I understand it, sort of the split between news and entertainment
Yeah.
and how video plays into that.
It's
Could
pretty-
you take us through it?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. There's no secret to this. BuzzFeed got to a point where it's big enough now, and it has a lot of employees, that we thought it'd make business sense to have a business division and an entertainment division. And that's what we did. And Ben runs the news division, and he was put ahead of that. And somebody wrote that this was backing away from news was just utterly absurd and ridiculous. In fact, it'll allow us to go into news even deeper because it's a separate unit. And Zay is great at producing short-form entertainment videos, and that's out in LA. And there were a few times when we thought if we had a more efficient organization where people knew who they were reporting to, not within news and entertainment, but marketing and ad sales and things like that, they were kind of getting confused, that if we separated it, we could build both faster. That's all there is to it.
And how big a deal is video within the news unit?
So we would like to build a video in the news unit, but it's at its infancy now. So I would think that in a couple of years it'll be big. But right now, most of the video, I think 99% of the video, or maybe 95% of the video, is all entertainment. But we're going to build up the news part just like we built up Now This News, but obviously not the same exactly. I mean, it's Ben's to do.
And then will that mean more people generally in the news unit? Will there
I don't
have
think
to
we
be
have
more?
to, I don't know, you know, every time I talk about BuzzFeed specifically, I get yelled at.
So keep going.
So, yeah, right. So I don't think we need to hire a lot more people. I think we probably need to move people around, would be my guess. We'll hire some people, but we were on a tear last year to hire people. We're not on a tear now. We have a good base of employees, and I think it's moving people from this desk to this desk, mostly.
Steve Shepard.
The first question dealt with business models for digital journalism. And when we're talking about revenue streams, the first one you mentioned was licensing of intellectual property.
That should have been my second one. Advertising was first.
Okay. My question is about intellectual property. Give us some examples of it and suggest what the magnitude of licensing of IP is in relation to advertising, circulation, merchandising, and all the rest of it.
Well, I kind of like make things up sometimes. So,
Your friends have noticed that, actually.
yeah, I know. Vice does exceptionally well at licensing IP, and they are years ahead of everybody else. And that's a big part of their business, not to take anything away from any other parts of their business, because it's a spectacularly successful company. But other large content companies, BuzzFeed, to name one, should lean into that and license their IP around the globe.
What would you license and to whom?
You'd license it to mobile carriers, you'd license it to cable TV, you'd license it internationally to other third parties, you'd license it to other media companies in Europe and in China and Asia, and it should be a real revenue stream in
Although
2-3 years.
historically, syndication, we used to call it,
Yeah.
never brought in a lot of revenue in the media business.
Well, that's because they didn't own the product. Now they do.
Yeah.
It brings
Although
in a lot of
sometimes
revenue.
they did. I mean, the New York Times had a news service, and they never really made a lot of
Oh,
money.
you're talking about,
Yeah.
I'm thinking about
I mean,
television.
So think of the
licensing of IP.
Entertainment.
so just think of think of the mobile phone for a second. So all these mobile operators are trying to figure out, well, like Verizon, right? So Verizon bought AOL, then they bought Yahoo. Whether they're going to be successful or not, who knows? But they want to offer their subscribers a lot of content. So where are they going to get that content from? They're going to license it, mostly, and they'll create some of it by companies they own. That's a big, huge market. I don't know how many, I don't talk in numbers, but that's like more than $1. So that's a big
And
business.
just a related question on the revenue side for digital media. The New York Times has been at it for a while, yet print advertising is still falling faster than digital advertising is growing.
Yeah, don't
Now-
let Barbara hear this question.
So the question is, your answer to advertising will work digitally.
No, it is working.
Yes, but I mean, it's not working fast enough. Your answer to that was,
Well-
it's going to take time, rather than digital ad rates are low, the volume is low,
So
the
here's the
rates are
thing.
low.
Okay, so here's the thing. It's working just fine for BuzzFeed. It's working just fine for digital-only companies. It's working spectacularly well. And it's working better and better every quarter for digital-only companies. But they don't have the print legacy, which is a completely different cost structure. So how to get out from under that print legacy without screwing up that business is really the key. And if that business costs X, you don't have Y to add on because of your legacy business, and you can't really go all in on digital. That's really the case. So I was talking about, in that example, I was talking about companies that are trying to make the transition from traditional, but for pure digital companies, the advertising is there and there to stay and growing leaps and bounds, leaps and bounds, leaps and bounds. There's no issue with advertising against digital companies, none at all.
Gentleman, second.
Yes, hi, Miguel Paz, teacher at the CUNY Graduate Journalism School. Some people and a lot of data shows that this country is going to be bilingual as well, among all the changes that are coming. And I'm interested in knowing your take on Univision's strategy of buying English language news outlets, and the last one, all the Gawker companies.
Univision is a I'm gonna get in trouble again. Univision is a really good, interesting company. I don't particularly understand their digital strategy. It seems a little random to me. I'm sure they have one. They're really, really smart, but I can't articulate some of the reasons they do some of the things they do.
Like what?
Like Gawker. I mean, I don't get it. Fusion is, I don't really understand it. I'm sure they have a strategy, but I don't really get it. So it's a little bit jello-y now. It doesn't mean it's going to be jello-y forever, but they're a terrific company and they're really smart, and I'm sure that they know exactly what they're doing. I just don't know what they're doing, but that's not my job.
Would you have a different answer for Telemundo? It's owned by NBC?
Yeah, I don't know. This is out of my area of expertise. I don't know. I won't make that one up. But I don't get the Gawker. I don't get paying $135 million for basically Jezebel and Lifehacker, if I got it right.
And Gizmodo.
Oh, sorry. I don't know. It seems like a lot of money to me. But
Gentleman,
I'm Shane English. I'm a current student here. So far, you've spoken mostly about much larger companies that have a national or international bent. Well, what would your advice be, or what are your thoughts on smaller companies that are focusing on a niche market, competing in a marketplace that's dominated by such huge companies?
So, content companies you're talking about, yeah?
Yes.
So you have to have a distributed content strategy and business model, or don't do it, which means your content needs to be created across the social feeds. You should have, maybe not. My son thinks definitely. He's smarter than me, so you should have a website too. But you better raise enough money to get you through the years where you're having to build a brand before you're going to monetize, because it's going to be 2 or 3 years before you can earn a dime. So you need to be well funded, but you could do it very inexpensively. The Dodo, which is my daughter's company, in the last 12 months went from 70 million to 700 million video views a month. It's a huge success story. She doesn't believe in press, so nobody knows this, and she'll be mad at me for saying it. But it's a great, and it's distributed content. It was not expensive. It's not expensive to run. And that's the model that I would use. I would do it just like the Dodo.
Thanks.
My name is
Sorry.
Julius Motel. I'm a recent graduate of the school here. My question is, how do you guard against an oversaturation of video? Because I find in just my time online consuming news every day, there are videos that don't need to be videos, that are, let's say, just graphics and subtitles that play silently as I scroll through Facebook. So how do you guard against that and do video better?
Well, I think if BuzzFeed wanted to as a strategy, they could have 10 billion video views. But what's the point? So I think you have to create videos that you think are of a certain quality that you can monetize. So to create videos just to create them, like you said, just to saturate the market, makes literally no sense. On Facebook, you can post X number of videos a day, and then the user will be turned off. So I think you have to be very careful. I think that's a good point, and the only way you can guard against it is be smart about how many you produce, why you're producing them, keep the quality up, and figure out how many go on each social feed per day without hurting yourself. Did I answer that? Okay.
I'm going to take a turn at the wheel. So this school, as you know, was founded to really provide digital journalism education, and the 20-somethings that are now creating the content for themselves, many of them are coming out of a school like this. If we want to make sure that we're positioning ourselves for the next decade, what are some of the things that you think our school should be dipping our toe into, maybe the whole toe? Examples. We haven't talked about VR tonight. We haven't talked about artificial intelligence. These are some of the sort of big picture questions that we're starting to grapple with. And I'm just wondering what your advice would be for a school and for a student body that's trying to position themselves for the next wave.
Yeah, so we had a partner meeting the other day, and somebody was talking about VR, and it's very difficult to invest in VR now because it's really early, and we did 1 or 2, I think, and they didn't really work out. But you have the flexibility here, because it's a university, to go all in. So based on whatever resources you have, I'd go all in on future technologies. Very different than the advice I'd give myself to invest in. I have to worry about timing much more than you have to worry about it. You have a student population, and you should have a course on VR, and you should have a course on 360, and you should lean way in on all that stuff, because tomorrow it's all going to be here for your students. So I would take the opposite view of investing if I were you.
The downside to being a university that's a public university is that there are limitations on our resources.
Oh, no, I know.
We really have to
I
pick our
know.
spots.
Well, right now, if you wanted to pick a spot, even though it's saturated, I would, there are a lot of jobs that are available now and that will be available for your students producing digital video. It's really hard to find people who know what they're doing. So if part of what you're doing here is helping your students get prepared for jobs, I would, I teach them that. I double the editing booths that you showed me. Ask de Blasio for more money. And I would really lean into that. Now, I would suggest that you don't get someone from 60 Minutes to teach your students how to produce that video, but you hire a 24-year-old from NowThis News to help you, to help them.
One other question. Do you think a journalism school like this one should be teaching journalists how to produce branded content?
No,
Because,
Ken would be mad at me if I said yes.
give me another reason.
That's enough.
Okay.
No, I really don't think, no, I don't.
But I really
no matter
would
what
like
he
to know,
thinks,
forgetting what Ken thinks.
No,
Why?
because this is a school of journalism. This isn't a school of advertising. No, I think that's a big mistake. Like, I would not, if I were on your board, I would go, oh, heaven forbid, don't teach, this is advertising. No. Now, the studios that are being built inside media companies, which are producing digital videos for brands, need to be separated, in my view, from the editorial body. But the talent and the expertise to produce those is very similar to producing editorial. But you have to separate it, and you shouldn't teach it.
Thank you.
I'll help you start an advertising school in another life.
No, thank you. Who else has got a
Do
question?
you agree with me?
No, but it's okay.
I said that for you.
Not enough.
Hello, yeah, my name is Christopher Anoa. I'm also a student at the CUNY J School. I am going to ask you about Trunk.
About who?
Trunk, the Tribune.
Oh, I know nothing about them. You know, I'm really confused about them.
So am I. That's why I was going to ask you the question.
I know, I haven't a clue.
This is the former Chicago Tribune.
Yes.
It's renamed itself.
I
Well-
just know what I read. I don't even understand the name.
I don't-
I don't get it.
Well, they're they advertise themselves as a company that is going to focus on artificial intelligence, machine learning
Yeah.
to make content. Do you see that as a step forward or a step backward for journalism besides the weird name?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I see that as a step forward, but maybe it's not going to happen there. I guess I think.
Okay, and one more thing. I see that you've mentioned video, which I do a lot of, and also traditional journalism, which I know a lot of people do also. However, you didn't mention audio. Podcasting is
Yeah.
very big, and BuzzFeed has podcasts now, and some of them I listen to regularly. What is the next step for podcasting? Is there going to be like a BuzzFeed radio network, a Huffington Post radio network, a WNYC Studios radio network, and no longer the turn on the dial daily news radio programs?
I love the concept of podcasting. I even have listened to one or two in my life. Not three, but one or two. Well, okay.
He's only the chairman.
Yeah, you can't expect me to listen to everything. But advertising's not there yet. It's going to be a long way for advertising to catch up with podcasting. So there have been a couple of companies that have come into our fund, really smart people who wanted to launch a podcasting company, and we passed on all of them. Not because we didn't think they were smart, not because we didn't think the edit would be great. We just didn't see how it would be monetized enough to be a great big company. So if you have the money and you can lean in a big company, lean in and give it a shot, but there's not a whole lot of money behind it in advertising, I don't think. Not now, anyway.
Yes.
So we're a couple of months away from a big election. A lot of people have been arguing recently about the role of the media, and I'm curious about how different you think it is now from the role of the media a generation ago in terms of the extent to which it may influence or not influence the election, sort of the role of the new media players like BuzzFeed, et cetera. Just your thoughts on sort of the differences between now and then and the impact that those players will have over the next couple of months.
Well, I'm just going to free associate. So the news cycle doesn't exist anymore, which changes politics enormously. I'm going to just give random thoughts because I'm not organized to do it any other way. But I remember when I ran campaigns and Ken ran campaigns, there was a news cycle, and you would do something at a certain part of the day, and then you'd go home, and then you read about it the next day, and then you have another news cycle, and that was pretty great. There's no news cycle now. It's literally insane. And stories pop up and then they disappear. And the news cycle is minute to minute, hour to hour. That's a huge difference if you're a campaign manager. You agree with that?
I do.
I think paid media is still, except for this crazy election, I think paid media is still as important as it's always been. We'll see how well Trump does or doesn't do, being outspent enormously by Clinton, yet to be seen. I mean, he's certainly managed to manipulate the United States press more than it's, I don't even know what to say. It's so insane. So,
when you say so insane, just to disaggregate that, you think the press is responsible in part for the standing of Donald Trump and the attention he's got?
I think that I think that it's a not unfair knock on CNN that for some period of time in the primaries, they went all in on Trump and helped him enormously. I know Jeff Zucker won't like that. Too bad. I think that was a strategy. I don't know it. I'm just looking at it from a distance. I think it was a strategy. It was a programming strategy, just like a programming strategy for the Today Show when he was head of the Today Show. So I think the press gave him a pass like I've never seen in politics in my lifetime and probably won't see again. And then I think it somewhat evened out. And I think, listen, I love the press. So when I say the press, I don't mean all the press, I think now those same players want to see a contest. And we've seen the ping and the pong of the press, and it's like if you watch football and a team is ahead 20-0 and there's 3 minutes left, the announcer goes, "Oh my God, there's going to be a comeback," right? Because they need you to watch the last 3 minutes. I think that's what we're going to see in this election, and I think some members of the press, mostly video players, are going to play that game again. So I don't know if I believe this. There's been a lot of manipulation in the media around this election, which I think is very unhealthy. That's number two. I don't know what else.
When you talk about change, I mean, one of the interesting debates that is going on and is surfacing, the Washington Post has done some piece on it, as have others, is this notion that and Jack Schaefer had a piece just yesterday, I believe, this whole notion of objective or fair or balanced or he said, she said, ping pong.
Yeah.
That what do you do when someone lies, as Donald Trump has been known to do on many occasions? Do you call them out, or do you take Chris Wallace's position that my job is not to be a fact checker?
That's an absurd notion by Chris Wallace. It's like ridiculous.
By the way, in fairness to him, it's one he didn't follow in the debate. He was pretty aggressive in challenging
Right.
the Republican candidates.
Look, I think I don't. There's like, who would disagree that you need to call him out? I mean, it's like, that's not like a real question. Of course you should.
Okay, let's go to the next question.
I mean,
let's
of
find a
course-
real question out here.
Obviously, before you didn't speak the highest of Gawker Media, and I don't think anyone had a problem with that. But
I wasn't putting down Gawker Media. I was saying, why would anyone spend $135 million for it? That's what I said.
either way, with
Either
the,
Are you a journalism student?
I was.
No, what you're saying is that was not a real answer, right?
The Pandora's box of sorts opened up by Peter Thiel being able to kind of open his wallet and shut down a media company.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the repercussions of that, kind of outside of what the actual case specified? Obviously, I think most people agreed that they were not well thought out to put up that video and whatever, but more so what the repercussions of a person with a lot of money being able to target a media company and a media entity. What do you think of that going forward?
Yeah, I think that's a really difficult question, one that I've thought about by myself, and I don't have a good answer. On one hand, it's a business to support lawsuits. A lot of people do it all the time. It's a real business. Funds do it. It's a real business. I don't think that funding a lawsuit is necessarily an evil or a bad thing at all. And then, if there are damages, then you funded it and you get some money. It's just a business proposition. I mean, I've never done it and wouldn't do it, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think Peter Thiel was wronged in a significant way by Gawker, from what I think the facts are. And
He was wronged.
yeah, he
Not
was
wronged,
wronged.
yeah.
He was wronged, and he was more than pissed. And when he saw an opportunity to close these guys down, he took it.
But Kenny, you don't worry.
I'm not defending him. I'm just saying.
No, but I want to ask
Yeah.
a good question. Here you are. You're a media proprietor today. Some wealthy guy, the Koch brothers, doesn't like something in BuzzFeed, and they sue you, and they have very deep pockets.
No, I know. Should they be allowed to sue me? I guess they should be allowed to sue me. Would we better have a lot of insurance to defend
But why are you
ourselves?
ambivalent then about Peter Thiel? You wouldn't be ambivalent about the Koch brothers suing you.
No, well, wait, he didn't sue them. He
No, he
paid for a
paid.
lawsuit.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I don't. At the end of the day, I don't have anything. I think what he did was not something that I might not do. Depends how pissed off I was, but I don't have a real problem with what he did. Although I know it's a slippery slope, and so I worry about the slippery slope. That's the problem with it. So, taken as an incident, and looking at that incident, I can't sit here and say Peter Thiel did something that I wouldn't have done, but he had the right to do it. But it is a very slippery slope, and I'm not smart enough to understand how slippery and when it becomes something that goes overboard.
We take one more.
That's not a good answer, I know, but it's a complicated issue.
We have one more question?
I guess I'll take one. Is there anybody back there? I guess I'm sort of coming away from this conversation feeling a little bit schizophrenic, in the sense that during the day I walk around and I talk to a lot of people, and there's a tremendous amount of hand-wringing about the state of journalism, the decline in quality, the shorter formats reduces the ability to tell more in-depth qualitative stories. We just heard about another round of buyouts of tremendously talented New York Times reporters, and we see companies closing down and laying off staff all over the country. And yet, when I listen to you it sounds as if you're very optimistic in general about the state of the industry and the employment prospects for our students and the profitability of digital media companies. And I guess I want to be optimistic. I want to go home tonight feeling really great. And so but I'm trying to square those two views of the world with what you're saying. And
Well, I only have a very optimistic view of this particular part of the world.
well, it's refreshing.
So I remember when MTV was launched, there were editorials all over the place saying this is the end of civilization, that my kids were going to be ruined, they were never going to read a book, the whole world was collapsing, and all they're going to do is watch stupid, vapid videos all day. I didn't get upset, and that didn't happen. And I hear about, and some people say that now, that the world is going to come to an end and our kids are all going to be stupid and they're all going to watch stupid, vapid videos. Give me a break. It's not going to happen. I think it's a great time for journalism. Obviously, it's a transition time, and transition and not being able to perfectly predict the future gives some people anxiety, but live with it. This is a wonderful time. I think journalism is alive and well and flourishing. I would bet you a nickel that there are more opportunities for your students to get jobs today than there were 15 years ago. It may be different kinds of jobs, but I'll tell you a funny story. So I taught at Columbia Journalism School for a couple of years, and Victor Navasky is a great friend of mine. And he said, listen, I think I taught one of the first digital courses. It wasn't a real course, it was me talking. But he said, when they announced that you were going to do this, I think there were some boos from the faculty members. Because, oh my God, you're going to teach digital journalism at Columbia? Like, how horrible. And they got with it, and I'm sure they have a lot of classes now in digital journalism. So all is good. You should be optimistic. Don't lose sleep tonight except over Donald Trump, and everything will be fine. Over Donald Trump and trunk, whatever that is.
I want to thank both of you. This has been a super interesting conversation. Ken Auletta and Ken Lerer, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.